program started by President Duterte, who serves as the chairman of the ruling party.
Yun po, nagsama-sama kami to make the formal announcement today that we are of Bongbong Marcos. Ito po ay desisyon ng partido where we went through the process based on our constitutions and bylaws.
Yung apat na kandidato, hindi ito pwedeng itutuloy yung pagbabago. Because ayaw nga nila yung mga ginawa ni Presidente Duterte. They've been attacking it, criticizing it on all the programs of government that he initiated. Kaya talagang hindi mo pwede.
The camp of Bongbong Marcos welcomes the endorsement from PDP Laban. Marcos Jr. spokesman Vic Rodriguez said in a statement that the endorsement reassures them that their message of unity is well received.
Senator Manny Pacquiao challenges former Senator Bongbong Marcos to a one-on-one debate.
Pag-usapan natin yung saan galing ill-gotten wealth, anong nagawa niya sa pagsiservisyo niya sa gobyerno, may nagawa ba siya? Pag-usapan natin yung issue niya sa taxes.
But it's not just Pacquiao who has something to say about Marcos Jr. Manila Mayor Isko Moreno slams BBM for his earlier statement regarding corruption.
So tayo'y maglilingkod, focus sa kanya, siya na manguna na i-surrender na lang nila yung marapat sa bansa para magamit natin itong ayuda.
We continue with our conversations with aspirants for the coming elections. This time we have a senatorial candidate. What are her plans and platforms, and how will she act on her intentions for a better Philippines? We will discuss in this episode of Face the Chiefs. Please stay tuned. We will be joined by the other chiefs when we return. Welcome to the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama po natin sa Maynila, joining us online, Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star, and here in Mandaluyong, in the studio with us, Ed Lingao of One News. Chiefs, good evening.
Good evening.
Happy Tuesday.
Ami, some developments today sa mga kampanya, no?
Oo nga. Well, ang importante yung testing ng COMELEC, during which they said na iimbestigahan daw nila yung mga reports of vote buying. Tingnan natin kung hanggang saan makarating yan, ano?
Bawat eleksyon naman yata ni-imbestigahan yan eh.
Tapos yung endorsement
ng PDP Laban.
PDP Laban.
Of
Surprise, surprise. In favor of Bongbong Marcos.
Although, may clarification pa rin si Martin Andanar, di ba? Sabi niya, neutral pa rin at this point, as of today, si President Duterte.
Yeah, but let's also remember he's chairman of the party, which was
Yes.
founded by
Nene Pimentel,
Nene Pimentel
Antonio Cuengo,
as an
and-
anti-Marcos party. So obviously, the irony is not lost on anybody there. But sa ngayon, let's talk to other candidates, not necessarily somebody running for president or vice president. We're going to talk to somebody who's running for senator. Joining us, Aksyon Demokratiko Senatorial Bet Samira Gutok. Good evening and welcome back to the Chiefs, Samira Gutok.
Good evening. Assalamualaikum, Robbie,
Alaikum salam.
Ed, Ma'am Ami.
Yes,
Yeah,
good evening.
wow, it's wonderful to come back po. I mean, this was one of the first places po talaga na who asked me about my movement last August or September.
And
It's good to have her live.
And it's still early
First
enough to say
time.
that you're one of the first to join us in the
Really?
studio live.
Wow, galing, nice.
And iba talaga, mas
Oo
madali
nga, no?
talaga.
Talaga, I mean, up close and personal. Thank you po.
So, kamusta ang kampanya?
Oh, it's so humbling po na in this pandemic, naramdaman natin ang kahirapan, kagipitan, actual on a campaign trail. And 1,000, 500, 300, 200, whatever po na location in the country, talaga pong maganda po yung face-to-face, no? Despite the protocol. So I'm grateful po that I get to experience the grassroots again after 2019.
Just to give us an idea, and not just for yourself, everybody who's running for Senate, I mean, how serious is in terms of the schedule, in terms of how tightly, in let's say in any given day, any given week, how many cities, how many sorties do you have to make?
So parang the longest day was 15 hours of standing on a caravan, 7 trips, 7 municipalities eh. So that's maximum from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. So a normal routine would be 8 o'clock to about 5, 6. So the whole day po yan, a caravan, town assembly, 4 municipalities at most. So yun, yeah, that's around the country. That's around the country.
Samira, there are those who still have a hangover over your political decisions.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically,
Oo naman.
you're deciding to join up with the ISCO
Yes,
instead of joining your former allies in 2019.
Yes,
How's that been? With your going around, with your talking to people, with your, I suppose, talking as well to former allies, how has that been?
Alam mo, nagpaalam ako, di ba? You're one of the first who interviewed me. Nagpaalam ako sa party, leadership, Senator, Vice Presidential, ngayon, Kiko. So, I did my consultation and that led to a decision. I had to make a decision. I was given a window of 3 days by the Action National Leadership to join the board. At that point, I didn't even know na Isko was going to run for presidency. He was our party president. So, yun, later on, I was in that process already of, as a party, getting to decide already on those action decisions. So, ganun po, Kaka-Ed. It's something of a journey for me from 2019 to now. Whatever po na, of course, I acknowledge po the feelings ng mga kasama po na formerly who supported and still who are, nagtatampo, of course. So, I may take it in stride po and I explain. I try to reach out to as many as I can. Bakit po?
But what was, I mean, just to recall that, and I do remember we had that conversation. Among other things, people, I think, if we recall, we're still waiting for a formal announcement also from Leni Robredo at that point,
Yes.
diba? But what ultimately was your, I mean, where ultimately did your decision hinge on who's slate to join Isko Moreno?
Well, one of which were my family asked me if I could join this kind of party or that kind of party, and the choice was either this or that party or this. So this was the journey I took na. This was the decision I take. So yun na po.
At that point,
yeah,
that was the
there was
better
that
choice.
window na parang, or else, dito ka na lang. So, and then resources and logistics. Alam natin, marami po of the other candidates they have already the family name, the long record. Well, siguro one of the youngest candidates, still I have to, grapple my way. I needed really a organization din, di ba?
Samira, controversial ko pa rin ngayon and it's
Ma'am
intriguing
Ami.
na it's happening during Women's Month to
Yes
a
po.
female candidate,
Yes, ma'am.
Nagkaroon ng intriga yata yung well, they see it as an endorsement of Mocha Uson's joining the group of, your group of Isko Moreno and saying na she is standing up for women. Anong masasabi mo about the criticism that you read for that statement?
Well, She was in that activity in Cavite rally po, Ma'am Ami. And I was there. I, of course, in that moment na reactive to that moment, hindi ko naman alam yung organization's flow of the program or who are the invitees po, Ma'am Ami. So, as a act of grace, parang ito po siya. And then when I was speaking, she was before me when I was speaking eh. So she introduced the two mothers in the crowd. She was talking about her party list as a candidate. Then ako din, along the way, syempre, we acknowledge everyone in the seats. So I got to say siguro na thank you, Mocha. Tapos parang Ma'am Ami, parang yun na po yung malaki yatang na I endorsed her, or that's the impression po that was given.
Are you saying that she is not standing up for women?
Hindi naman po. She is also carrying po a organization on women. That's why po I got to acknowledge her po then po. And aside from, she was sitting in that stage with me, and it was my first time to see her, Ma'am Ami. So siguro naman it's a bit over inflated to say that I was already like hangang-hanga, because I know that we have a history.
And
Ma'am Ami,
with
diba?
that history, and I can imagine how nabigla ka.
That
diba?
environment, opo.
Nabigla ka and
That
so on. But you've had
environment.
a couple of days now
Yes,
to
opo.
reflect on that, and as well as the criticism ng mga tao. So, with that perspective, how would you qualify now you're essentially being on the same side, the same party, the same group as somebody like Mocha Uson?
Well, I was grateful for her upload. I think she said that ako na nga ang sumasama kina Samira. I mean, the group of Bilis Kilos, and wow, it means we got to be convincing ba of our principles, philosophies as a party. I mean, the party siguro is something that she read through on the philosophies, and hopefully people will always be able to convert, switch nga di ba po? Switch movement. So I hope po na we both share the women's cause, hopefully, and that doesn't mean I don't discount her history, track record of red tagging and all that, but that was the first time we saw each other, and evolving as it is, we hope to learn more. No, I hope she learns more of our advocacy as feminists.
Of course, we all wish that we could all be comfortable with all of our allies,
Of everyone.
whether it's short term or long term. Diba? I mean, it's a blessing if that happens. Na you're always comfortable with your allies. But for example, in the future, would you be comfortable with Mocha Uson on the same stage, with the same platforms, on the same side, or is that a stretch?
And I also reminded, di ba, yung sa pagpunta niya sa mosque, there was a shoes, di ba?
Yeah.
So,
Yes,
I mean, I would be aware na ito po, I mean, these were things that are really offensive to me, but she was open about listening to me, and I saw her on stage, and hopefully we get to, kasi this is political, and the action is supposedly a centrist party nga. And we hope na she gets to adopt our philosophies and principles along the way.
Samira, the PDP Laban Kusi wing endorsed today, Bongbong Marcos as the standard bearer. No, parang adopted lang naman nila. Pero your standard bearer is still, I think, hopeful na he will actually get the endorsement of President Duterte himself, although the President, of course, will chairs the KUS wing, no? Although clarify nga ng Malacanang na he's still neutral at this point. Umaasa pa rin. How do you feel about your standard bearer wanting an endorsement from President Duterte?
Well, his statement was he treats him like any voter po, Ma'am Ami. And I think I respect President in that way, a presidential isko, that as a voter, as a candidate asking any voter, and President is a voter, no special treatment, one vote, one person, he needs to solicit also the President's vote. And again, the article na I'm in gratitude, Samira is in gratitude, welcoming, voter din si President. And I also echo that way na Mindanaoan siya, Davaoenyo, yes. We don't again forget the track record history of his presidency. But then he's also a voter. And so, yeah.
But then, of course, the obvious thing, that President Duterte is not just a voter.
Yes, he is
and along with trying to
executive.
court, exactly, and along with trying to court his support, not just his vote, is also basically the implicit message that your candidate is there to continue the programs of President Duterte. And also implicitly, a lot of people would presume your candidate not being able to confront, as you said, the history and the troublesome things that we have seen of this administration, concerns for human rights, concerns for rule of law, the misogyny, and so on. So how do you reconcile that? He's not just a voter.
Yes po. Robbie, we've been together 6 months on speaking tours, on dialogues with the communities. And at one point, di ba po, may mga misunderstanding along the way. But I hear him echo, Samira, I'm clearly rule of law, accountability, susundan natin. And maybe my placement, Kaka Robbie, Ed, Ma'am Ami, my placement as a woman, activist, feminist, has not been consumed, has not been dilated, has not been depleted. And maybe I have this role in this party, in this organization, with ISCO. And even if we hear these jokes along the way sa mga rallies, this kind of setting environment, this is way where which we get to feed into each other. I mean, he obviously grew up from the, sabi nga, street language, and I, also an activist, feed into each other's experience. So Kaka Robbie, we always feed into each other's advocacy. He hears me 6 months, and he knows my record. I also hear him build the good projects. Sabi niya, build. Drug rehabilitation, treat drugs as an addiction, acknowledge EJKs. I mean, these are things that we share in common.
Okay, what about the other candidate? The other candidate you did not join. I don't know. What are your thoughts now on the campaign of Vice President Leni Robredo, and your thoughts on presidential candidate Leni Robredo?
Yeah, Vice President Leni's campaign seems to be going on trail in Mindanao and in the provinces. And just like me, we are really going to the esquinitas of every place that we can get hosted upon. This is sponsors and hosts. And so, yeah, it's great seeing all the parties, and VP Leni, I haven't seen her of recent, so I wish everyone luck.
Well, speaking of Mindanao, Samira, you've been part of the ARMM and
Yes.
Bangsamoro development. Ano pa sa tingin mo needs to be done while they have extended us the term of the officials there? At this point, what are the priorities? What are the most urgent matters
Yes,
that need to be addressed?
Ma'am Ami, the combatant status, Ed knows this, has to be really transitioned seriously po eh. So as part of the transition is the combatants, MILF combatants, has to be trained, or the integration program has to be budgeted and programmed fully and monitored by the Office of the President and the BARM itself, because they have to work with the PNP and a whole lot of training groups, institutions. So that's, I think, critical, Ed, kasi po, yan po, when you put in peace and normalcy, po, is that you bring in the investor confidence.
Normalizing the
Yes,
situation.
normalizing. We call it the normalization sa annexes ng peace agreements. Oo.
But
So,
from your perspective, how's it going? I mean, we have BARM already in place. We have the BTA extension and so on down the line. How is it going so far from your assessment, from your point of view? Is there room for more improvement in what way?
Yes, so that's why siguro po ang involvement namin as future senators and hopefuls is that we get to highlight the fast tracking of such process, and if there's any support that is needed to fast track through an intergovernmental board, which the organic law recognizes, there's a mechanism by which you talk to national government agencies. Yan po yung mekanismo in the BOL. So it could be faster, but we need more updates. I think there's not much yet really reported by media, Ma'am Ami. So siguro yun po ang aking tulong kung sakaling mailuklok tayo doon is to always ask and do oversight.
Sige na, for your legislation, what will you file related to Mindanao development?
Related to Mindanao and, yes, Ma'am Ami, related to Mindanao and peace, which I carry is a so-called Magna Carta on crisis, or the 3 C's on crisis, calamity, and COVID rehabilitation, which recognizes mental crisis, which recognizes war trauma, which recognizes calamity as we are second in the world. So we want to bring people back to normalcy po eh. Wala pong ganung framework by which from normal to abnormalcy, ibabalik mo sila sa normalcy. So I'd like to provide a framework po, ma'am, from my experience having spoken in Ukraine on refugee status. Sorry about what's happening to Ukraine, if I can put that in. So that would be something of a law or framework that supports rehabilitation of victims. And po, paano sa sunog, sa crisis, violence against women, war victims, paano po natin ibalik ang kanilang normal na estado po.
You spoke about your advocacies feeding each other. Is there anything about BARM and the BOL that you found you've had to personally enlighten other candidates, including your candidate for president? I mean, something that you don't necessarily have to correct, but at least you feel that you can contribute in terms of, you know, framing it better for candidates who don't necessarily have the same background as you on
Yes,
these
Robbie.
issues.
Women, parang wala masyadong face yung mga kababaihan. Kaya again, parang being compelled to give a face to Muslim women. Hindi po kami discouraged to be in political. So the COMELEC code or the election code now that the BOL, Bangsamoro government can draft is a way by which to show Philippine government that Muslim women pala can also form part of political parties. It's one of the greatest stereotypes of our whole Muslim and the whole world, that Muslim women are just, you know, masked. Nakanikab po kami eh. So, yeah, sabi niya, wear your properly because it should be fully covered daw, Samira. So parang that stereotype po that Muslim women can actually participate, and political party building is something I like to highlight to Isko kasi he talks about federalization or representation of islands, Cordillerans, Bangsamoro into the National Senate, into a national institution. And I think I appreciate that of him, and he has this foresight to see that we need a Senate that is representative more of the littler regions that is provided in the Constitution, the autonomous regions.
Pakistan is a very conservative country, yet they had Bhutto.
Yes, matagal si Benazir, and she was a symbolism for the Muslim world. So yeah, we don't have that kind of symbolism yet, maybe, but of course we had Senator Santanina Rasul as of recent. Parang konti pa kami. Although magagaling, marami pong kababaihan, teachers, we have ministers, we have women getting into the security force. It's wonderful.
Speak more about that. You mentioned the proposal ni Isko Moreno. I do remember that regional representation essentially at the level of the Senate, not just at the House.
At the Senate, because this is the one with the national perspective, itong ating Senado. Sila po yung nagre-representa ng national perspective and pulse. And the Congress is where party lists are situated in geographical affinity. So, itong Senate, yun nga, nakita niya parang, kaya si Samira ang hirap-hirap, nahihirapan talaga to get into, and the Cordillerans.
Okay.
So, thank you for acknowledging that.
We're speaking with Samira Gutok, tumatakbo po sa pagka-senador with the ticket of Isko Moreno. We will have her still when we come back. Please stay with us. We will just take a break.
Tonight, we continue our conversation with aspirants for the coming 2022 elections. Let's find out the plans of the candidates as they face the chiefs. With us, of course, is Aksyon Demokratiko Senator Albet Miragutok. In this segment, we will ask the candidate about his or her views on important issues. Now, we prepared some big-ticket issues, but we will not do a fast talk kind of interview. We hope to discuss all of these issues within the given time, which is 30 minutes. Now, let's begin. Sam, let's start off with something very close to your heart. The Southern Philippines. From your perspective, if you do get into the Senate, what do you want to do in terms of legislation for the Southern Philippines?
Anti-discrimination bill endures when it'll make an impact on hiring. It'll make an impact for Manila companies, Visayan companies, urban centers to be able to hire from the far-flung. So I think that would be great to see our country hiring from the farther southern Philippines.
So what exactly will be in that piece of legislation?
There's an active call for Muslims, for indigenous peoples, for people from the provinces.
Affirmative action.
Yes, po, affirmative action, and of course the LGBTs, senior citizens, even PWDs. Kasi ito po yung sectors that are recognized as, malayo po sa ating mga
You create incentives or
formal
there's a quota?
institutions. There's companies are given incentives, companies are encouraged, and so anti-discrimination bill actually provides that framework that we shouldn't discriminate based on gender, race, or gender creed.
Sam, balikan ko yung BARM. It has the lowest vaccination rate in the country.
Yes, Ma'am.
Are you planning to propose any law that should be incorporated into a pandemic exit plan?
That's true. That's why po there's this Magna Carta po, because it's also about prevention of disease, and that includes infectious diseases, COVID. So napakalaking bagay po sa vaccination drive natin in that law is to involve the religious leaders, Ma'am Ami. Malaki talaga in the hierarchy of influences natin sa Muslim region that Allah, God, is number one, not the state. So malaking bagay po that the MRLs, Muslim religious leaders, are part of a drive or educational forum or platform.
You think that's the problem now kung bakit napakababa ng, mataas yung vaccine hesitancy or talaga lang mahirap dalhin ng vaccine sa BARM?
It used to be that reproductive health was so unpopular. We really had to tap into the MRLs as a woman leader. So malaking bagay po that there is people who are actually telling us in the pulpit na dapat po yun ang encouragement.
What about women? It's still Women's Month.
Yes.
At the same time, this has been the past weeks have been a time to acknowledge the progress as well as the continuing challenges. What's your legislative agenda for women?
Well, nandyan na po yung mga CEDAW conventions po, nandyan po yung Women in Nation Building Act, the major push for companies to have affirmative actions on more promotions for women in the boards, companies. I was thinking along the line po that we can encourage the Commission on Audit to require the mayors, the LGUs, to really have a substantive GAD, Gender and Development. It's not just a token appointment, but really actively involving the men, because Women's Day is about men, educating also yung mga kalalakihan about their relationship, the inequality of it. So nakakashock po to see a basketball star or some celebrity binubugbog yung kanyang misis. I mean, these are part of our culture of violence that we need to fight as women, and so we need really the institutions that penalize or the institutions that should educate and also provide mayors that LG that hand na, yung ira mo, hindi namin nire-release kung hindi ka strong yung GAD or anti-VAUSI education, implementation, enforcement mo.
Where exactly is the weakness there?
The police officers, at the police level na po reporting and women don't report VAUSI. There's shame and embarrassment. Mag-isa yung babae sa bahay, nahihiya siya po ipubliko yung kanyang weakness or vulnerability. So we need to really have a support system as well. So if this oversight reminds agencies, if it's the PNP, DSWD, women's support groups, hotline, kailangan po all working together so that enabling po siya, hindi takot ang babae na mapupubliko siya or what kind of privacy concerns also are protected for a woman victim.
What about the peace process? Not just in the southern Philippines, but as well all over the country, including the communist insurgency.
Yes.
What's your stand on that?
Well,
Whether it's peace talks or the NTF-LCAC or red tagging?
That's true. I'm grateful po that ISCO supports peace talks. He was there as a panel member with the CPP. So napaka big po chunk of my lifetime work is on peace advocacy. So napaka malaking push ko po is to support the peace talks as a primacy mechanism to bring the stakeholders together. I think that's a far cry from this administration right now. So that would shift our gear towards supporting confidence building on the ground and not red tag each other. I mean, red tag the groups. So that I think is one major push.
What do we do with NTF-LCAC?
Well, yeah, he says, I think I echo also that positioning that we should put the money for build projects on peace building on the ground. So get the children to peace education activities, learn from each other, and multi-diversity cultural relationship, supporting the PNP, Army, civilian relations mechanism.
The mandate of NTF-LCAC is clear, di ba?
Yeah.
But the way it's been implemented and really abused is another thing. So my question is, as it's currently constituted, and it's let's also put it this way, as it's currently branded and perceived in the minds of people right now, what do you think we should do?
Kasi po, the OPAP is there, Office of the Presidential Advisor. I would think now we would look at the upgrading of the peace process as a department. And that covers what the NTF-LCAC actually does na on communist insurgency. So we would have to interface, we'd have to look at how budgets are being allocated. It's always, kami po peace advocate, the roots of terror. You have to really get into the educational system. You have to make the soldiers and PNP also understand the peace process. As a course module, we push that in the TRADOC Army, the Doctrina School. We'd like to see that progress po so that they understand napaka-deep po rin yung the roots of this insurgency, one of the longest in the world.
But part of the problem of the insurgency has to do with the political system and the need for political reform.
Inequity.
Yeah. So do you have any ideas there? Whether it's political party reform or just simply, quite generally, political reform?
Marginalization is our story as people from the provinces, from the south. Di ba po kaya po nagrebellion more rebellion, and that also has resonance with the communist insurgency na tao walang titulo, tao walang lupain, tao walang documentation, tao walang identity, tao in martial law. We had the Jabida Massacre Day, hindi kinikilala ng Pilipinas dahil it's a fiction. I mean, these are things that fuel. I mean, it's the same for the communist insurgency. Hindi nakikilala yung mga kwento at naratibo at mga namatayan, mga survivorship needs of the families and the women. So, yes po, I mean, it's something that we have to really revisit as a formal track, as a formal programming, and we hope the next administration looks into this.
Some poverty is also one of the biggest roots of insurgency as well. And BARM is, I think, the poorest area in the country right now. Although because of the pandemic, the entire country is suffering now. If you win, what are your plans for economic reforms by way of economic development, spurring business, for example?
The confidence for investment really is absent muna po, Ma'am Ami. So where I am, I was situated in Mindanao State University as a regent, and we don't have even much factory or much placement for offices, non-government, for our students, thousands who graduate in the main campus of our Mindanao University. So really, my job is to bring that confidence and put in frameworks in the anti-discrimination, encouragement to companies, incentives if there's incentives for taxation, deductions for companies to go into the poorest of the poor locations. Eco-zone concept ba, Ma'am Ami? So meron pong best practices na rin, Ma'am, di ba? We can put it here in the south, in the ARM, Bangsamoro.
Okay. How else? Now let's change topics. I want to zoom out to national issues. South China Sea. What do you think government should be doing?
International studies level as a student, I would always remember that yes, we all have our national interests, and it is to our national interest really the reaffirmation of what is ours, and the Hague ruling, the rulings that have already been already given forth. So even in Ocho Derecho, yun na po yung what we carry, and I still carry that po. I still carry that as a Philippine nation, our territorial integrity, that extends to that islands, and we should be able to manifest that to that international community. This is ours.
Okay.
We should be able to say that in oral, verbal, oral, and in written manifestations.
What does that translate to when it comes to Sabah?
When in Sabah, it's very complicated at that. Malaysia is now the facilitator of the successful peace talks between government and MILF. So we need country-to-country talks. Siyempre, Malaysia is already a partner in the peace process. So kailangan i-revisit natin, the heirs of the Kiram are part of the talks. Kailangan pong bisitahin natin ulit yan, yung historical claim natin. Kasi alam natin na Marcos period, yan po yung tension that brought the Moro rebellion to.
Yeah, but we revisit it. But to what direction?
To what direction? Okay, the heirs have a claim. Is that claim consonant and of interest to the Bangsamoro government? So, syempre, these are ministers. This is a MILF who are at the helm. And I think they will be continuing beyond this administration to be holding the helm. So would it be productive to them? And as a senator, I would have to also ask Bangsamoro government, ano bang natin, Sultan Kiram heirs, would that be in friction, tension? So I'll have to not naman mediate, but be in the middle of
but you let the Bangsamoro take the lead essentially.
Bridging the stakeholders. We have to also remind that this is a long historic claim, source of tension since the Marcos period. So I think the tensions will have to grow and come out of talks, so-called talks internally from the Bangsamoro people themselves. And the Kirams will be critical in this process.
But like you said, it is a very complex and very, very it's been 60 years since Malaysia started governing Sabah, and now you have so many million
voting na yung
people
Sabah
there
sa Malaysia
who consider themselves as
they're
simply
voters,
Malaysians,
Sabahans with passports.
And you go there,
in Malaysia.
we went there. We talked to Filipinos who recoiled at the idea of the Philippines taking back Sabah because they said, umalis nga kami ng Pilipinas ahabulin kami ng Pilipinas hanggang sa Sabah.
As a senator po, future po, ang nakikita ko, Roby, yung first step muna Ma'am Ami, is the documentation of all the halaws and put them into humanitarian status or support by the DSWD if there's a social welfare project for them, because many of them don't have the IDs necessary for them to be given ayuda. So the arm of the Philippine government should be able to be open kasi you bring them into Bangkas but they go back, di ba po? So there's no confidence to return to Zamboanga, Sulu, Tawi-Tawi. So we might as well have a program that extends to employment nila and recognizing that process, di ba? Social project.
One of the biggest causes of underdevelopment is corruption. If you're going to win, are you planning any legislation?
One of the
problem.
That's true, ma'am. The Transparency and Governance, Good Governance TAG project, which we pushed in ARM, knowing that we have major problems on transparency, is something that we'd like to see on a national scale po. Maybe that databasing and more Wi-Fi steady, mas strong po tayo on internet, will be able to give whistleblowers the necessary confidence to report and document certain corrupt practices from their agencies. So protecting also the whistleblowers for me is something to look at.
You think it's proper that
There's also this observation that corruption starts during the campaign.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you've been conducting campaigns. This is your second time. What can you say about this observation?
That's something very true, ma'am, and very meaningful to me as a NAMFREL volunteer, that I've been very emotional in certain forums. Nang hirap-hirap po ng small candidates like us who have like this program only to tell about ourselves. And I'm grateful for that. So electoral reforms on itong minimum talaga na expenses para po hindi ka nag so-called refund, no? Pagpunta mo sa opisina. Kasi how can you pay if you pay multi-million po for ads, get that on a 300,000 salary as a senator?
Yeah.
It bewilders me. It
I'll
appalls me. I don't know how I will survive actually this election, but sana po in the future, the winners can take to task.
I can believe you na ikaw abonado pa. But I'll swing to the other side of this dilemma. Do you think it was proper for your presidential candidate to keep any surplus of his campaign funds?
So he was an artist with ads. He was a mayor with, he's still an artist with his advertisements. I understand that he has so many donors or sponsors that already trust his identity as this personality, which I don't have, sadly. I'm not an artista. So he has that funds, and maybe that's what's also supporting some of what he has to run as a presidential.
No, but I mean, take away.
And he has complied with his taxation requirements.
Yeah, but that's besides it. Let's take away ISCO from it. Just my question is, do you think it's proper, and do you think it's wise, or do you think it corrupts the political process when our process basically allows candidates, certain candidates, no, not all obviously, but certain candidates to basically make a lot of money out of the electoral process. Yes.
You had Mikey Arroyo, and then you had Benigno Aquino III, who also was able to,
a lot of candidates,
to keep some campaign
in
funds.
fairness, it's not just him. A lot of candidates do that. Do you think that's
his acknowledgement
proper?
and his disclosure would actually mean, si Isko, that his case, his example, his template should be able to address a needed COMELEC gap or reform electorally. So that will it itself be a room for action. And thankfully, he's open about it, si Isko, and that will be a future action for electoral reform.
Which is what? To be explicit about
Yet,
it.
well,
What's the
if you
action?
do have a donor excess, then let's program it. Do you return it? There's a ruling regulation to that effect. What to do? What to do with it? Basically.
Well, do you have any specific ideas on how a campaign should be carried out expenditure-wise? Because like Sal Panelos told us, dapat daw COMELEC na lang yung mag-sponsor lahat ng mga campaign activities para hindi na lumabas. You know, there are those suggestions. Ikaw, seeing what you're seeing now, your experience from 2019, what do you think? How do you think the campaign should be carried out to drastically cut expenditures? For example, and minimize utang na loob to donors.
On our action assembly, August, September, I was really already pushing for COMELEC mandated activities. It should be under the ambit jurisdiction, public education drive, or the debates and appearances and guestings, all with parang standardized na po, Ma'am Ami ba? Parang parehong airtime for everyone. So the mayamans don't get the excess time, the celebrities don't get the excess time. It's really standard across all candidates. So that could be something that I actually proposed it to the National Assembly of Action to call out COMELEC, and COMELEC is doing the debates now.
Well, let me push that proposal a bit further. In some countries, you have public funding for political parties. Of course, in those countries, the political parties work.
Yes.
which may be a different case in the Philippines. But at least theoretically, do you see any wisdom there? Let's broaden it a bit. Political party reform. Everything from public funding for political parties to anti-turncoatism to political dynasties and so on down the line.
As a BARM person, ito yung aking familiarity. We're pushing for political party building and support of the government for political parties to be able to organize, to be able to educate the women and the marginalized, the fisher folk to join.
Multi-party.
Yes po. Can that be done nationally? Why not? Public support, public funds for public party building, especially for marginalized na alam natin, pinapasukan na yun ng party list ng mga mayaman sa National Congress. So that could be a mechanism po to look into professionalization of parties, equal access, pare-pareho lang tayong airtime, pare-pareho lang tayo, and we should stand on certain clear terms or issues. So
Do you think it's possible to have, never mind not a multi-party system, two-party system, or maybe even three? You think that's possible?
We're one of the oldest democracies, supposedly, in Asia and not in the world, and we should be able to, upgrade ourselves or that. Kasi right now, free for all, hirap na hirap po. I mean, for us little candidates to really get out there. So political parties will actually mainstream, or how do you call it, streamline, and make identities really clear on where we stand as issues and not personality-driven na yung ating mga pinagtitindigan.
How about dynasties? You think it's realistic, or especially in Mindanao, the clans are so strong. Nagpapatayan mga tao dyan over clan feuds. You think it's possible actually to regulate dynasty building, especially in the South, for example?
Well, in the southern Philippines, we acknowledge a lot of the movement is needed to fight off the centralization of power, and that's through and the dynasties is that eh. So, yeah, mahirap talaga labanan, Ma'am Ami. We've worked as election volunteers for educating people. Of course, the fight and combat with law is not as pushed. So that's why I think one of the things that I, as a senatorial, would like to remind BARM, if there's mechanisms in that COMELEC code that they pass for the smaller parties and regulating the dynasties to certain numbers of family members that can be in public office, maybe, so that this BARM government, which is supposedly our mandate as former Bangsamoro commissioners writing the law, is a reminder to the national government. It can be a template, actually, for national.
O sige, up to what degree, kung sakasakali, if you're going to regulate?
Well, three could be looked at. Three could be looked at. Three could be looked at. Oo. Kasi normal na po yung mother, father, mag-asawa.
You mean to the third degree or three members of a
Three
family?
members of a
Kasi
family.
kung the third
Three
degree,
members of a
Akala ko
family.
degree, sobrang laki.
Three members of a family. Three members of a
Isang barangay
family.
yun eh.
Oo, kasi Southern Philippines, especially the Bangsamoro, normal po yan na mararami po sila eh, in one family.
Yes. How about term limits? Kasi sabi nila kaya daw nagda-dynasty building because of yung term limits ay hindi pwedeng tuloy-tuloy forever and ever yung isang tao lang. Kaya pinapalit na lang si Mrs., si anak, everybody.
You can look at the programs po on sustainability. Hindi daw nakakasustain sa 6 years yung isang presidency. So I'd like to look at NEDA studies, studies on to what extent dapat ang isang existing presidency or administration should extend to sustain programs. Hirap daw po eh. Like Bill, kinatatakot na nila na baka hindi extend.
What about federalism?
I was known to question federalism. Sinabi ko sa debate, sikmura muna before politika. Looking at the pandemic response, I was there po trying to look for PPEs for doctors and nurses in some Mindanao hospitals. Ang laki po ng advantage that BARM was able to find PPEs because it can. It can find grants. It can enter into grants as an arm, BARM. So they're able to access the necessary donations without having to go through a DBM or whatever process because of autonomy. So that in itself, I think in this crisis, in this pandemic, need of bilis kilos na aming framework pinupushes, I think federalization has its merits po.
I don't know
on
if
services
it's,
delivery.
I don't know if it's a culture, but there's certainly a gun crisis in the country. In the sense that it's really proliferating. It's easy to get guns, whether it's legal or illegal. Certainly, it's much more. It's pronounced as well in certain regions. Certainly in Mindanao.
Yeah,
how would you address the gun problem in the country?
In that normalization track that we have, there's incentivizing for people to get back into the track of government, rule of law. I would think that getting them incentives to register and to be part of that inventory of firearms, to make it legal for them to own a firearm, to get the rebels into the peace process if that's the conflict area. I mean, we have to put that enabling and confidence building environment for the illegal guns owners to get into that registry.
But registration is your mechanism,
Yes,
not towards a direction of really making it difficult, if not outlawing private ownership.
Yung flow of the shipment siguro, just like drugs, we'll look at how it's brought into the Philippines, itong underground economy of firearms. I think we should look into a more stricter Navy management, coastal management. So I think that should be also.
Di ba gobyerno rin ang source ng mga illegal firearms? You go around rebel camps and puro government issued
You were there
firearms.
to cover Ed,
whether it's the New People's Army, the MLF, or the MILF, or even the Abu Sayyaf in many cases, these are issued by the armory.
Internal cleansing na rin po yun. It's part of the internal cleansing, and we hope as government officials in the future, we can get to help oversight.
Well, you mentioned drugs. Your standard bearer still courting the support of President Duterte, who just said na ang gusto daw niya, yung successor niya, ituloy na pagpapapatayin yung mga drug trafficker. What do you think of that?
He said to ipagpatuloy? I hope not.
Yung reporter daw niya, gusto niya, kung sakali sana daw, makausap niya para sabihin niya, i-advise daw niya ituloy pa rin yung pagpatay sa mga drug personalities. What do you think of that suggestion?
Ma'am Ami kasi I heard him echo in interviews na talagang ifa-follow niya po yung rule of law, and so I think that should be the track that we should affirm as a party, no? Na our presidential has echoed it in certain forums na interviews na rule of law, so it means walang patay dapat, ma'am, walang patay, and that's our role as also human rights defenders here.
Okay. Lito Banayo said that all the candidates have to recognize that the common enemy is Bongbong Marcos, referring to Marcos not only as the obvious front runner, but also on the level of principles, acknowledging the history, the troubled history with corruption and human rights of the Marcos name and family. We're only about a little less than 2 months. Do you think that with that in mind, that there should be talks, and what would be your position to trying to unify the opposition towards a common candidate?
So yeah, we're supposed to be a centrist party, Action. We acknowledge that. But at the same time, I'm the one with that experience telling the party that there are transitional justice issues of the Bangsamoro homeland that we aren't able yet to overcome, the nightmares of our people who weren't able to claim in the Human Rights Claims Board from the Marcos administration of the 1970s, and that this should be a part of that factor of determining our future president. So, yun po, I mean, we should remind ourselves that accountability is still key. We shouldn't forget ever the excesses of the past.
Yeah, but uniting the opposition?
Yeah. So to Robbie's point, in other words, as the elections come near, ano yung position mo when it comes to having some sort of unified
from all
unity
the parties,
talks?
from all the parties.
Unity. If you
From all the
only have
parties.
one shot and one candidate that has a chance to against Bongbong Marcos, do you think other candidates should give way to the front runners in the opposition?
In the opposition, who are they kaya? And anyway, I would want that our party, Bilis Kilos, will continue to push for its frontliner. I mean, that's why I made this decision. And if in case nga they have to talk, then the process will have to happen. The parties will have
But
to
did
happen.
you even hear any talk of possible consolidation within your group?
Well, the unity talks of the past 6 months is something that something that reminds us that hindi nangyari eh. So, if it's 4 weeks to go na and it's a Ramadan din, I hope it can happen. 1 week.
Let me rephrase and reframe. Anong chances, let's say 3 weeks before the elections, anong chances, meron pa bang chance na maluso yung mga LQ, yung mga quarrel ng
Or should there be that option?
We're thick on the campaign po, Kakarobi, Ami, Ede. So, I wouldn't be able to gauge actually as early as now. So, I'm not sure. I'm not sure really.
Okay. Well, Samira Gutok po, kandidato ng Aksyon Demokratiko sa pagka-senador. Samira, anong numero mo?
32 ang ating number. Yes, but 47 years old.
Oh, you didn't have to say that. Shukran.
Proud.
Okay, number 32 po sa
Thank you.
Balotas.
Thank you, the
Samira
Chiefs.
Gutok.
Wow.
Thank you.
Maraming salamat.
Thank you.
And that's all for this edition of the Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. Before we go, a reminder to everyone, mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Ed Lingao, and we are One News.